Welcome, everybody, to this special episode of Faith, Family, and Freedom, where Jim Hochberg, my partner in crime, and I are going to delve into the big issue right now facing Hawaii, and that is forced vaccinations.
You're in the middle of my screen, pal.
Now, many of you know that I was on the mainland for the last 2 weeks, and so I came back to quite a bit of unhappiness around the state. In fact, there have been several protests at the Capitol, at the Department of Health, people that are feeling like, okay, enough is enough. Now, one of the things that Jim and I are going to discuss today, and I think it's really important, is something that's happening right now is a lot of people are filling out these opt-out vaccination forms. And while opt-out forms can be good and they can be used for a very productive thing, I wanted Jim to hop onto the conversation to really explain, first of all, what our Constitution says about our rights, because I hear a lot of you out there saying it's against my constitutional rights to be vaccinated or to be forced to be vaccinated. I hear a lot of you out there saying, I have this form, I'm good to go. And I think Jim is going to walk us through what it actually means according to the Constitution, and actually what does having an opt-out form mean, and what does it provide, and what could happen once you turn that in. So welcome to the show, Jim.
Hey, Eva, welcome back to Honolulu.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I really like your new office there.
This has been my office. I don't usually bring my laptop. This has been my office since 1998.
Well, just so that people know this is not a fake background, why don't you grab one of those books up? Yes, grab a book off the shelf.
Here,
That's
take
right.
A book.
That's right. And what are those for people that don't recognize what they are?
The brown ones are called Hawaii Reports. All of the Intermediate Court of Appeals and Hawaii Supreme Court of Appeals decisions get published in the brown books. The green books, that's like an encyclopedia of the law. Those are probably haven't been up to date for 30 years, but they look nice. We're talking about the mandatory vaccinations, which currently there are none, but there have been threats and deadlines for mandatory vaccinations in Hawaii. And there are several layers of different ways that might come about, but it's not yet. One of them is if you're talking about when you want to go to work, your employer is telling you you have to have a vaccination by September or something or whatever. The other is if you want to put your child in school or have your child play sports in school, or you're an adult that wants to go to college, or, and we haven't heard this much here, but it's happening in New York City, if you want to go to a restaurant or a theater or a sporting event. And those are all different scenarios with different legal analyses and different approaches. I'm going to leave the New York City example out of the conversation unless we have more time later, because it's not happening here. But if you're at work and your employer is telling you you have to get a vaccine by a certain day, chances are you've got two different avenues. One is if you are a unionized worker, your union shop steward is the first person you go talk to and say, I have an objection. And the objection could be a religious objection. It could be a science medical objection. You could have an objection to taking the vaccine because of a personal health condition that's within your body, your metabolism, or you could not like the way the medical, the vaccine was created, which is not a religious, it could also be a religious reason on that grounds. But what I'm saying is you have to know what your real complaint is. So if you're at work, you talk to the shop steward, tell them the reason you don't want the vaccine, and their duty is to advocate for you to management. They probably aren't going to, because this is Hawaii and the unions and the way things are run by the government kind of go hand in hand, but that's the first step. If you're not unionized, you need to go to the HR department and tell them you want a copy in writing of the written policy for getting an exemption to the mandate. They may not have one. They need to tell you that in writing. If they do have one, you want them to give you the form that you're supposed to use to apply for the exemption. And you want to tailor your application to your beliefs, but to their policy, because you don't want to put in an application that is contrary to the policy, so you get denied.
You know, that this is really important, Jim. And I think that as you and I have been talking over the past several days, one of the things that concerns us about these forms that are going around, right? Because a lot of people obviously don't want to be forced to do this. So they're developing their own forms. They're finding forms on the internet. People are sharing forms. I got this from my friend, my uncle, my brother, my niece, my friend on the mainland, my pastor. But you have a specific concern about just pulling any form and filling it out and turning it in. So please share with our viewers, this is really important, why you have some concerns about these forms that are floating around.
Okay, so the process of asking for an exemption from a mandated anything at work, and this would apply at school, and it actually applies outside of this mandated vaccine thing to if you wanted to enter into a contract, if you wanted to lease an apartment that you own to somebody. Those are legal relationships, and the piece of paper is going to be what the court looks at when there's a dispute about how it went down. And I have had case after case in my private law practice where people wanted to save money, and so they went and grabbed a contract off the internet and they used it, and then they had a dispute about it, and when a lawyer read the contract, it's terrible. There's no quality control on documents on the internet. They're somebody's idea. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not good. When you're talking about this vaccine mandate at work, what really matters is what is the policy either in the unionized workplace or in the non-unionized workplace. Those policies are out of the HR departments and you have to follow them. So just taking something off the internet that somebody wrote in some geographic location that you don't even know where it came from is like the last choice.
The other point that you make, which is a good one, and again, a very important nuance that I think people need to be aware of, is if a court case is brought up based on one of these not so good opt-out forms, what could be the potential ramification of that?
Well, you get a bad result that applies everywhere else, and people that want to avoid that bad result have to be able to distinguish their case from that case. And in fact, a very good point that you raise is people also think, and I think it's because of the abortion argument, it's my body, it's my choice. We think it's our body, it's our choice not to get a vaccine. And the problem with that is the Jacobson decision out of the United States Supreme Court in 1905. And in 1905, when the Jacobson case was decided, it was this guy, Mr. Jacobson, sued the state of Massachusetts because in 1905, they actually had a smallpox problem. And the state said you have to get vaccinated. And Mr. Jacobson had a particular medical condition that he should not take that vaccine because of what was in the vaccine with his own personal metabolism. And the state was saying, because of smallpox, you have to take it. And he sued and went all the way up to the Supreme Court. 115 years ago, when constitutional law was very different than it is today, but this is the result of that case. The Supreme Court of the United States ruled that vaccination program that has a real and substantial relation to the protection of public health and safety can mandate people take a vaccine. Their medical condition indicates they risk adverse effects from. That's not a religious exemption. That's not a philosophical objection. That's not objecting because aborted fetus tissue was used in the testing or whatever. That's just my body is going to have a bad reaction to what's in there. I don't want to do it. The US Supreme Court said a real and substantial relation to the protection of the public health and safety is enough to make you take it, Mr. Jacobson. That has not been overturned. It will probably be overturned when the Supreme Court finally has to deal with it. But in the meantime, that's why the president is saying they can mandate. That's why the 2 cases I filed last time and the other cases across the country ran into that problem. It is a bad case precedent.
Okay, so this is really good. And I think our viewers and listeners are going to find this really important because number one, there are people, let's acknowledge there are people that do not want to be forced to take vaccinations. And I think both you and I agree that the government shouldn't force people to take vaccinations. But what we want to do is arm you, dear listener, with what you can do if, like Jim mentioned, what your employer approaches you and says, okay, you've got to be vaccinated in order to maintain your employment here. So let's deal with one of the biggest things we're hearing out there is, well, my employer can't do that because it's against my constitutional rights. So Jim, let's dial it back. I know you have talked about this before, but let's really encapsulate this for people. Can people use that argument? It's against my constitutional rights to force me to get a vaccine.
Well, anybody can make any argument they want. But I think what you really are asking me is, what does the Constitution say about vaccinations? Nothing. Okay. It also doesn't say anything about abortion. So it doesn't really mean anything that it doesn't say anything about vaccinations. It does say that you are free from the government unreasonably searching or seizing you, which forcing you to get a vaccine may be a seizure, maybe, and I don't mean a medical seizure, I mean like taking your privacy away from you. They're seizing your right to privacy, which again, isn't in the Constitution. It supports the right to an abortion because the right to privacy, according to the US Supreme Court, emanates, whatever that means, out of the penumbra, whatever that is, of the rights that are stated. You have the right to free speech, freedom of religion, free exercise, and freedom from establishment. You have the freedom to gather. You have the freedom to own, keep and bear arms. You have the freedom not to testify against yourself, to be free from unreasonable searches and seizure, blah, 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 blah. Those freedoms somehow have a structural penumbra, and I don't know what that is. And out of that structural penumbra emanate the right to an abortion. So you would think also the right not to take a vaccination against your will is also something that emanates from that penumbra. But again, that's such a weird phrase that the Supreme Court came up with in 1973 that it's going to take the Supreme Court to decide what it means when you ask them 5 years from the day you file your lawsuit to not take the vaccine, whether you're right or not. So is there a constitutional right not to take the vaccination? It's up to the Supreme Court because that's how we've evolved our political legal system, which I think is tragic.
So instead of saying it's against my constitutional rights to force me to do this vaccine, what terminology would you recommend people use instead? Okay,
so let's look at this brief that's filed, this is this week, at the United States Supreme Court. This is Ryan Klassen's case where he's asking the court to order that he not be forced to take the vaccine because he doesn't want to do it without informed consent. which is a legal way of saying until the experiment is over, I can't have informed consent because I can't be informed. You do your emergency use authorization experiment, which I don't want to participate in. You analyze all the data when you're done, which they're not done yet. You take the analysis of your data and you compile your report on what are the side effects, all of them, cataloged every one of them that you've come up with through the experiment that you're still doing with the people that are willing to participate. And then you also have a complete list of all the conditions in the test takers that you find means they are not good candidates because they have this, that, or the other thing, which you don't know until you do the experiment and you look at your data. After all that's done, then you can inform me and then I can consent.
Okay, so that was a lot of good legal information, but capsulating it into just a statement. So rather than saying it's against
The
my
statement is, I don't want to participate in the experiment. Give me the after experiment medical report and let me figure out if I want the vaccination at that time. So get your experiment done, because the experimentation approval, the emergency use authorization from the FDA to Pfizer, to Moderna, and to Johnson & Johnson specifically requires everybody that takes the vaccine in the emergency use application has to voluntarily agree. Nobody can be compelled because there is no FDA approved vaccine for COVID.
Okay,
It says that, in fact, if people get, like I have gotten tired of reading articles about official things, that articles spin the official thing. So it's way better to read the official thing. We can post with this copy of the actual December Federal Register legal filing by the FDA announcing the authorization, emergency use to Pfizer and Moderna. It has in it the actual letter that FDA sent to Pfizer and the separate actual letter that the FDA sent to Moderna. You may use your vaccine that you applied for emergency use. It's authorized under these conditions, which include participation has to be voluntary, and the vaccine giver has to give the vaccine receiver, before the vaccination is given, a fact sheet approved by the FDA for that particular vaccine, either the Pfizer one, the Moderna one, or the J&J. And they're different because they're specific to the vaccine that's being given. And it has 7 pages of information that repeats over and over. This is not an approved FDA vaccine. There's no other FDA approved vaccine. This is for emergency use. It's in an experiment. You have to voluntarily agree. Okay. So I want people to take that from you, and I want them to bring it to their boss. I want them to bring it to the coach. I want them to bring it to the union shop steward and say, why are you making me violate this? Now, here's the interesting kind of tricky thing that bothers me more than anything with unethical government officials. So recently, the Department of Justice issued their legal brief that wasn't in a case. They just made it up to have, because President Biden asked the Department of Justice to tell him whether it's legal for states and businesses and schools and stuff to require a vaccination. And so the legal gymnastics that the Department of Justice went through came out like this. Oh, so the emergency use authorization says the person who gives the shot has to make sure that the person getting the shot voluntarily consents. But the school or the employer or the coach or the state or the county that's requiring the vaccine, they're not giving the shot. They're not the one that has to make sure it's voluntary. And that, when I read that, I was like, okay, so what are we supposed to do then? Our boss says you got to get the shot. So you go to the shot place and you tell the shot giver, I don't voluntarily consent. So then the shot giver says, well, I can't give you the shot. And you say, okay, you go back to the boss and you say, oh, I went to get the shot, but the shot giver wouldn't give it to me. Now what? I mean, that is just so stupid. It's like Alice in Wonderland's Tea Party.
Well, but this is where we're at in today's world. People are quoting what they're reading online or what President Biden says, or even what Governor Ige says. And what's happening is there's such a muddy pile of information out there that's what, in my opinion, is creating more and more pandemonium out there. And so we've got people angry. They don't like being having forced to wear masks. They don't like that the governor has, has scaled back on the freedoms that he was providing, and now we're scaling back. And what does that mean if the numbers continue to go up? So people are getting upset, right? I mean, that's what's happening. But then when you get people who are passionate about this and they start pushing information out there, and then they tell people what people should be doing, when your lawyers like you are the ones that are going to be trying to get the cases that are going to move the proper arguments forward so that the right decisions can be made. That's what's concerning me right now, is that people are upset and they're getting information all over the place. So if we go back to what you were saying about the steps that people should take, answer the question that I'm hearing every day. I'm getting a new email or a new text message or a new phone call from somebody saying, oh, I need an attorney because I want to sue. What needs to happen in order for there to be a good person to sue and make the right argument? Because like you said, people can sue for anything, but what would the best candidate look like to you?
That's not a question that can be answered. The claim could be at work. It could be unionized work. It could be ununionized work. The claim could be at school. It could be in college, or it could be in high school or middle school or elementary school. The claim could be in athletics, or it could be at a restaurant, or it could be in a hotel or on an airplane. There is no perfect candidate for where the claim arises. Then there's also the question, well, why don't you want to take the vaccine? It could be for religious reasons, because of aborted fetal material in the testing, or it could be because I don't want to be part of the experiment, or it could be because I don't like taking medication, or it could be because I don't think I need to risk the side effects of the vaccination because I'm only 50 years old, I'm in very good health, and if I get the thing, I'm probably 99% going to recover and have natural antibodies. So any of those connected variables are a different human being.
Okay, so I guess what this means though is, again, I'm getting all these different emails. So how do we steer people to do the right thing though? Because I mean, I could give you the name of
here's what
25
people need to know. Here's what people need to know. Why don't you individually, your own self, why do you not want to take the vaccine? Because there's a lot of very good different reasons, but you have to know your own reason.
And
whatever it is.
And you know, you and I talk about this all the time. Please don't just listen to the Department of Health or the governor or your pastor and say, I don't want to do it because so-and-so says I shouldn't do it. I think what Jim is saying is you individually have to know and be able to articulate your personal reasons for not wanting to be vaccinated.
Okay, so you figured out your reason. Then you look at where is the requirement coming to me from. If it's coming to me from my employer, the federal government regulates discrimination in employment in most bigger companies, not the teeny tiny ones. And you cannot be discriminated against in employment on a couple of grounds. race, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression. So if your reason for not wanting to take the vaccine doesn't fit under one of those protected classes at work, you're not going to be able to use the formal federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission response. However, if your reason for not wanting the vaccine fits under one of those categories of protected classes, say for instance, for religious reasons, you don't want to take the vaccine, federal law requires the employer, if you tell the employer you have a religious objection, like you don't want to work on Sunday, or if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, you don't want to work on Saturday, or if you're Jewish, you don't want to work on Friday night, the employer is required to do what they can reasonably to offer you an accommodation, which means if that employer can reasonably exempt you, they have to do it. A reasonable exemption probably will be regular testing and mask wearing. Probably.
And what if somebody has a problem with that? So they're going, okay, look, you're giving me the accommodation.
You cannot approach a legal problem and be unreasonable because you will lose.
I appreciate, Jim, that you said that, because I know this because I'm traveling in circles where people are like, well, I'm not going to be vaccinated. I'm not going to wear this mask. I don't care what the government says, and I get it. I get why people are so frustrated about that. You don't like being forced to wear a mask. And so I know
I'm exempt.
You're exempt, but for the regular person out there who may not understand all the exemptions, I mean, I think that the important thing, thank you. What Jim is showing, we will make sure that we get this out to you.
So this is Exhibit A to the August 5th order. It has a list of A through K exemptions to the face covering requirement.
All right.
The first one is individuals with medical conditions or disabilities where the wearing of a face covering may pose a health or safety risk to the individual. I'm exempt.
Okay. And some of you may be listening going, hey, wait, that applies to me too. You might be exempt too, but there's a right way.
So the point of raising that though, Eva, is in relation to don't be unreasonable. You have to know the facts before you make a proclamation that you're not going to do something. It's pretty easy to be exempt. That's 1 out of A through K. I think that's probably 9 or 10 listed. I haven't counted them. A through K. Is that 10? I don't know, 11.
Well, this is a good
point
place.
Is, don't be unreasonable.
Okay, and this is a good place to break. We're going to continue the discussion. There's more to talk about, but we want to take a quick break and we will be right back. Thank you, everybody. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. I know that just like me, you all are sitting there going, wow, that was a whole lot of information that Jim just threw out. And so what we're going to do in this next 15 minutes is we're going to hone everything we just talked about into a call to action. And what I will do through Hawaii Family Forum is I will develop a cheat sheet for you that we will have posted on our website that you will be able to disseminate to your friends and family who are asking you, because these conversations we know are happening across the board. And so we want to arm you with the right information because there's a lot of crazy information that's out there. So Jim, why don't we do that? Why don't we provide them with some very basic steps that need to be taken?
So I'm going to divide it into work and school, because the restaurants and stuff here aren't really getting into it. So if you are being told at work, you have to get the vaccine. And if you work for the state of Hawaii or the city and county of any of the counties in Hawaii, just contact attorney Sean Louise, L-U-I-Z, Sean, S-H-A-W-N, Louise, L-U-I-Z. He is putting together a case on behalf of county and state employees being told that by August, I forget the deadline, 16 or 20 or something like that, you're supposed to get vaccinated. Call his office, which I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I've been
I'll put
talking
it on
to
the
him,
bottom of the screen.
and I know he's working on that group of plaintiffs. He's got first responders and all kinds of people involved. If you don't work for the state or local county governments, you're in private employment, then here's what I want you to do. If you're in the union, get the shop steward to give you the company's policy for getting an exemption from the vaccination. You want it in writing, and you want the form if the shop steward has the form. Same thing if you're not unionized. Go to the HR, say, I want a written policy for getting an exemption from the vaccine, and I would like the form to fill out after I've read the policy to apply for it. Do that before whatever the deadline is the employers are giving you. So at least you didn't miss the deadline and do nothing. And my expectation is if you're engaged with HR, they won't be chasing you, they'll be chasing the people that didn't get in touch with them first. So kind of like by attrition, they'll get to you eventually, but at least you engaged and you're trying, you've told them you want an exemption, but don't tell them what kind of exemption, tell them you want the policy for exemptions. Whatever their policy is, you want to read it. Because that will be very helpful to figure out how you need to address your request. Okay. And just to be kind of dumb, but to make it make sense. If the policy for exemptions say something like only people that write with their left hand can be exempted, you want to know that before you ask for the exemption. Now, I know none of the policies say that, but they all have words in them that say something. So you want to know what the policy is, and then you make your application. If you make your application and you get denied, then you contact the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the Department of Labor of the United States government, and you file a complaint that you asked for an exemption and you didn't get one. If your request wasn't on the basis of those categories that the employment law protects you from, you may get denied. But if it is within one of those, and the easiest one is a religious exemption, the EEOC then will do an investigation. So you don't need a lawyer. They'll do the investigation. They'll take down your complaint. They'll send the employer notice of the complaint and ask for a response. And you don't really have to have a lawyer for that process. So everybody can take advantage of it. It will take months, during which time you shouldn't have to get the vaccine. Now, during the time you're not getting the vaccine, you're probably going to have to mask, social distance, and test. And I'm telling you, that is not unreasonable. If, like half of the world believes, everybody's going to get COVID and everybody's going to die. So even though you don't believe that, like I don't believe that, it's reasonable if you do believe that to require masking, social distancing, and testing, because we've done that for an entire year.
Now, Jim, what do you recommend if somebody has pulled one of these opt-out forms off of the internet, or they got it from their pastor or their friend or their doctor or whatever, and they've already turned that in? What is your recommendation? Do they wait and see what happens?
I can't make any kind of recommendation because I haven't seen what, I don't know. They may have taken care of the problem. They may have created a problem. I have no idea.
But do you still recommend? So I pulled, let me say I did. Okay, I'll be that person. I pulled this information that I got from my pastor and I filled it out and I turned it into my employer. I haven't heard anything. Do you still recommend that I go to the Human Resources Department of my employer and ask for the exemption policy, even though I've already turned in? Or is that too late? Or what do you think?
So I don't know. I'm not giving any legal advice in that situation. I want you to scroll across the bottom of the screen. This is not legal advice. This is a discussion. I don't know. I have nothing to say about that because I don't know who the person is. I don't know why they object. I don't know who's telling them to get the vaccine, and I don't know what they submitted. I have no idea.
So that goes back to what we said in the first part of the show, is that, for all of you that just reacted and grabbed these forms and turned it in, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you at this point because we don't know the circumstances, as Jim has mentioned. But for those of you who maybe has the form and you haven't done anything with it yet, then let's back up and do the steps as Jim just presented them. So
let me say this. If I was watching this and I had submitted something else, I would get down on my knees and start praying fervently that the Lord would use that thing to get me his will.
Okay, well, everything we do, Jim, you and I say this all the time. Everything we do is based on the foundational gospel values that you and I have deep within us. Everything we do, we exude the gospel of Jesus, or at least we try to, in everything that we do. So of course, when we're starting the steps, and maybe I'll put this on the cheat sheet, is everything should start with prayer, and your reactions should always be done in grace and mercy. So there is a time for protest, and there is a time to show up at the Department of Health or at the Capitol waving signs. But if you do that, I strongly recommend that you remember that you're always wearing Jesus Christ as a garment, and you should be doing things with love and respect. Don't threaten people. Jim and I will not support threats. We don't support name calling. We don't support you trashing somebody's belief because you don't agree with them. You have a right to your opinion and you should share them, but please remember that you should be exuding Jesus in all your actions. Jim, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know that you and I have been watching.
I have two thoughts. One is I still need to do the academic part. We talked about the employment part, but I have a metaphysical question. And before I just agree with you that everything I do is always in the Holy Spirit, I always wondered this. When I'm asleep, am I sleeping under the power of the Holy Spirit or in my carnal self? I don't know.
Well, I would say, and I'm not a theologian, that the Holy Spirit doesn't leave us, we leave him. So I would think that if we're in, if you're having one of those dreams you're not supposed to have, or you're in a dangerous place,
exactly,
then I would believe that the Holy Spirit is still hovering and still trying to bless you and bring you back. And maybe that's what he's doing, is trying to bring you back into that place where you're doing what's right and what's good, all of those things we're supposed to be doing as Christians. But let's not lose track of what we're supposed to be doing in this 15 minutes. So now go back to the academic side. So
the academic part, I'm more focused on the 15 and younger kids in school.
Okay.
Because the emergency use authorization from the FDA for all three of these vaccines is not for that age group. There is no emergency use authorization for little kids. And so you mentioned it earlier, I'm actually trying to get the right clients to file a case with the Children's Health Defense, which is Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s organization nationally. We've talked on Zoom things with the lawyers and on the phones, and we're looking for 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade kids, hopefully in the public school, mostly on Oahu, just because it's more convenient, and most of them are on Oahu, who have been told they have to vaccinate, which probably means they're athletes. They want to play sports. And that the child genuinely does not want the vaccination and can articulate why, and the parents support that. I would like to have 5 or 6 that age school children in the public school who meet the criteria to contact me, because we want to do that case.
All right, I'm going to put Jim's contact information on the bottom of the screen, and I will also try to link it in the links below so that you can reach out to Jim directly. And you know what? If you know of somebody also who might fit that category, forward them this video and tell them to watch it, and so that they will kind of get the context of what we're talking about. In fact, we strongly encourage that you like this video and you share it, because this is going to be a new effort of Hawaii Family Forum to try and put out specific content like this that really drills down deep into specific issues. And the only way we're going to continue to do this is if you all help it grow. So you've got to like it and share it, and comment below. And Jim and I will try to address those comments as they come in. So 2 hats. You are either working for an employer and you've got these issues, or you've got a child in the age group that Jim mentioned that attends public school and you fit that. And so again, we're going to do a cheat sheet for you so that you'll know, okay, I fit in this category. What do I do? And, you know, keep us abreast of what's happening out there. If you've turned in one of those opt-out forms that you pulled off of the internet, just kind of let us know what's going on with them so that Jim and I can be better prepared for what's happening. Anyway,
and there is a sandwich group that we didn't talk about, which is older kids and young adults that are in university. And they have exactly the same possible objections, but they don't have the same avenue of relief. And if it's a private university, it gets even more difficult. But let me go back to the thing you said about bad cases create bad precedent. The University of Indiana has been sued by 8 students who are being told they have to get the vaccine and they don't want to. They lost. They appealed to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. They lost, and they're asking the Supreme Court to take the case. Here's the problem with that case. From my understanding, 6 of the plaintiffs requested and got exemptions. And the exemption said you don't have to get the vaccine, but you have to mask and test and social distance. And they're objecting to that. And they lost.
Yeah, see,
the 7th one has a religious exemption, but didn't even ask for the exemption, and he lost. And the last one doesn't have a religious exemption, but when you're on a team with 7 losers, you're going to lose too.
Well, and Jim, again, this is why we're doing this show today. There is so much misinformation out there because people are angry. And so what we're trying to do is sort through all of that frustration and anger and get to the things that are going to make a difference, because we get it that you're upset. We get it that you don't want to do it. But, you know, before you react, take a step back and find out what is the recommended steps so that we can really make a difference spiritually and legally. And that's what we're trying to provide for you today. So we appreciate that you're sitting with us.
So in the university setting, the best case would be a state school, the University of Hawaii, not BYU, not HPU, not Chaminade, University of Hawaii, scholarship athlete with a full ride who's going to lose their scholarship if they don't take the vaccination. That's another case that I would be interested in.
Okay, so we're going to just take a very quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to leave the last word to Jim, and he's going to talk with you about some of the things that have maybe been creating a deep set of frustration within him. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. You've hung in there for 45 minutes, and we really want to hone these last 15 minutes into some real action steps. But I think before we do that, because we want to end always on a positive note, Jim has some thoughts about what we do as a community and raising our voices and all of that stuff. And a lot of you may not know, or you do know, and maybe you forgot, or maybe you've always known and you've been wondering what he's been up to. Jim is also the president of the C4 organization, Hawaii Family Advocates. Hawaii Family Advocates works very closely with Hawaii Family Forum, and we are a 501c3 organization, which means we do more education in the community. But Jim has worn the hat as president of Hawaii Family Advocates since 2010. Now, there was a time he stepped away and he came back. And if some of you will remember, Duke Iona stepped in and was the president for a time as well. But Jim, now taking off your lawyer hat and putting on your public policy hat, I know you have some thoughts. So please share with us what you're thinking.
So Eva and I have spent decades lobbying at the legislature in hearings, talking privately with legislators in their offices, trying to get public policy to at least include the values that the faith-based community, people with biblical worldview, would like their government to be. And we've asked for all those years for you to help us, to join us, to participate, to show up. And sometimes you have, sometimes only some of you have, sometimes a lot of you have, and sometimes none of you have. And now we're actually seeing a much bigger response, which is a great thing. It's a great thing, actually. In fact, I really wish this level of enthusiasm to protect your rights had been exercised by every one of you the whole time we've been trying to do things with you, and ended up mostly doing things for you because you weren't there. But it's kind of interesting. So it's like COVID restrictions was the temperature on the water on the stove that finally caused you, the frog in the water, to be boiling. But that means you were sitting in that water for a really long time, from when it was pond temperature to when it slowly got warmer until now it's boiling, and now you want to jump out. And that's all a good thing. But what you need to think about is, what is the difference today than before? One of the differences is our lack of engagement with the government caused the government to believe it could get away with doing this to us. And we weren't engaged with the government because we've been taught incorrectly not to talk politics and religion in polite company. But if you're not able to talk about politics, that then leads you to maybe believe that it's not your government. But we know from the state constitution, Article 1, Section 1, all political power rests inherently in the people, and good government requires them to be responsible for that power. And I like to say it's been this way instead of that way. The way it has been is, you look at the government like the same way you look at your neighbor's car in his garage. Ain't your car. You don't clean it, you don't drive it, you don't put oil in it, you don't gas it up, and you don't insure it. All you do is watch it go by so it doesn't hurt you. That's what we've been doing with our government. And they've been very happy about that. And their glee and joy has made them believe they can make you take a vaccination that isn't even FDA approved, realizing that sometimes the FDA approves things that turned out to be a mistake. So what I'm thinking about is, you got to not just be mad that you're in the boiling water, you've got to own your government. And that means you've got to be a very active political activist in the election cycle. You got to be helping people who want to run for office. You got to run for office. You've got to give money to people that want to run for office. You got to give yourself money if you want to run for office. You have to know your legislators. You got to know the governor. You make appointments with them. You're a voter. they're going to meet with you. They're going to know you because you've met them, you've talked to them, you've told them what's on your heart, what you would like the government to be like. It's not your neighbor's car. It's your car.
Yes. And, it's such a good point that you make, Jim. And I want to reiterate this because I keep getting notifications from people in government that they're being threatened by people in our community. And when I say threatened, I'm not talking about where Jim and I don't like this either, but when people say we're going to vote you out of office. And the reason we don't like that threat is, as Jim mentioned, we have been around for a very long time. In fact, if you're watching this on the Hawaii Family Forum YouTube channel, you're seeing that one of the old videos that are there are from our red shirt rally that we did many years ago. And you will see some of the nasty comments that were made to us at the time because we were defending traditional marriage. But the point I'm making is that one of the things that we never advocated for was telling people you're going to vote them out of office, because there is no precedent for that here in Hawaii. Jim,
there is precedent.
Where?
As a matter of fact, it's the election cycle of 2014, because in 2013, in the end of October and the beginning of November, when we had the red shirt rally against same-sex marriage, and there were 10,000 people at the Capitol protesting same-sex marriage, the legislature passed it anyway.
Well, that's what I mean.
And the precedent is in 2014, like every other even year, we had an election and nobody got voted out.
And that's my point. So if you're at the Capitol saying we're going to vote you out of office, I can guarantee you that most of the legislators are thinking, go ahead and try, because you have a right to do that.
And that's because the water wasn't hot enough then, because they weren't telling you to take a vaccination. But do you realize the fallout since same-sex marriage?
Yes.
Go ahead, tell everybody what the legislature has done since then.
Well, and you can look at the proof is in the pudding at everything that has happened since then. They're not afraid. In fact, I actually overheard a legislator several years ago say that the faith-based community in Hawaii is a paper tiger. And, you can do petitions and you can show up at the Capitol with your little signs and you can, and again, I'm not telling you not to do that. So please don't send me any nasty emails saying, well, Eva's saying not to do that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there has to be a strategy, a plan into what you're doing. And it has to be a long-term plan. You have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and stay in the battle, because unless 40 to 50% of the entire population, voting population, wakes up and votes some people out of office, it's going to take us a little time to get where we need to be, to where we're more of a balanced state. It's not going to happen in 2022 unless there's a major, major shift. It's not even going to happen in 2024 unless there's a major shift. Now, one or two people, maybe. And that's one of the goals of Hawaii Family Advocate. And which brings me to the last point that we want to make before, in these last few minutes is, if you're considering running for office, or you think that you know someone who might be a good politician, you know what? There's also steps that need to be taken to run for office. You can't just say, oh, this person is a pastor. Or this person, I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on pastors. I love the pastors, but okay, just because this person is a doctor or this person is a lawyer, they'd make a great candidate. That is not necessarily the case. And so if you're considering running for office, or you know someone, then talk to people who do this for a living, who can help you walk through the process. Because especially if you're going to run as a Republican in the state of Hawaii, you need to know what you're going to be up against. And it is not an easy battle. I mean, look at Senator Kurt Favela, the only Republican in the Senate. And people are wondering why he can't do more. One Republican against 24 Democrats. I'm not saying they can't do anything, but I'm saying that, again, every move has to be strategic. And
but actually, if you think about it, Senator Favela isn't even the Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. He can't do anything by himself.
And there's my point. So, why don't we get better policy, here in the state of Hawaii?
Well, here's the reason. Because what our side tends to do is get mad about something and throw a bunch of fury into it. And when it doesn't work out, then they stop. What the other side does is relentless pursuit of an objective for years until they get it. And that's why they win and we lose.
Well, and also I want to be honest about this too. Another thing is because like Hawaii Family Forum has been, along with Hawaii Family Advocates, Hawaii Family Forum has been around since 1998. And Hawaii Family Advocates sprung from Hawaii Family Forum because we knew there had to be some different battles that had to take place, and our hands were tied as a C3. But going back to the beginning, Hawaii Family Forum has fought so many issues. You know, we were always, the people used to say that, you know, that we only focused on same-sex marriage, and that was not correct. You know, the history of Hawaii Family Forum, we fought for young girls who were being exploited in the sex trade long before all these other groups popped up. So we've been doing a lot of different issues. And so for us to be able to focus on all these issues out there, it does mean that we can't hyper focus like some groups do. Right? Some groups can say, I'm only going to deal with this one issue, which means they can pour all their resources into one issue. It's why Planned Parenthood is successful, because they're able to just wade in on the issues, although we do see their hands in other pies. But the point is that all their funding, I mean, Jim, let's be honest here. The funding is not where it needs to be in order for us to do what we need to do in the community. And so it's really important that you really pray about where you're putting your money, because
well, and here's the, I'll use the word frustrating part about doing this work. And I do it as a volunteer. You have a paid position, and I'm very happy that you do. Planned Parenthood can spend more than $5 million and build a new building on Beretania, and we can't even raise $50,000. I mean, well, it's very hard to get people that take family responsibility serious to part with their money because they got families to pay for.
We do. And, you know, in this last minute or so before we end the program, you know, we just make a call out to you. If you have the ability to donate, and you know, Hawaii Family Forum is a 501c3 organization. It's a one-woman shop. I would love it to be a two-person shop or a three-person shop, but unless we get more funding, it can't happen. And so me, the one person, I want to do more in the community, but I can't. The Lord always provides just what we need. So if that's something that you're called to do, then please do. But if you're a person that has financial means and you don't necessarily need the tax write-off, but you want to begin to see a difference in Hawaii's political climate, maybe a different person run for office, then consider putting your money into Hawaii Family Advocates. And we will put that information down below so that you can go and see what they're doing. We have to keep it completely separate. You cannot donate one for the other. We prefer that you donate to where the Lord is leading you to donate. And we ask you to do that very prayerfully and very, you know, with deep consideration as we move forward. Well, we're down to the last few seconds of the show, and I want to thank you for sitting with us for this hour as we really talked about vaccination mandates and what that means for you. Stay plugged in, and if there's a particular issue here in the state of Hawaii that you want Jim and I to drill down with this kind of thoroughness, then send me an email at eva@hawaiifamilyforum.org, and we'll make that happen. So thank you, Jim, for spending time with us today.
Thank you. It's always fun.
All right. And for the rest of you, we'll see you next time. Mahalo for joining us on Faith, Family, and Freedom.